Today, I'm very happy to introduce Dr. Pete Beckman. Pete is a professor at Northwestern University and is a global expert in high-end computing systems, in particular building cyber infrastructure for AI and edge computing. Dr. Beckman has a PhD in computer science from Indiana University and has led a wide range of projects. To name a few, the Argo project, a U.S. Department of Energy initiative developing next-generation operating system and runtime software for exascale computing, the Array of Things and Waggle projects, which developed sensor nodes to collect and process real-time data. And he also served as the co-director for the Northwestern University Argonne Institute for Science and Engineering. He is currently the director of the Sage Grande Testbed, a National Science Foundation funded project, which provides a cutting edge artificial intelligence cyber infrastructure to support advanced AI research. Today, Pete will give a talk about distributed sensing and edge computing titled Sage Grande, Put Your Sensors on the Edge with AI at Neon Sites and Beyond. And with that, I'll pass it over to Pete. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Samantha, for the introduction. And I'm excited to be able to present and talk. And I'll try very hard to keep the presentation a little bit shorter than the full time so that we have time for questions and discussions. Since I think that's the most fun part about being able to interact in a large community, in an open science community. So I'll start immediately. I'll just share my presentation here and let's get going. So we'll do the share and here we are. Okay, so hopefully you can see my presentation now. And so I want to start with a little bit of a disclaimer here, which is that I am giving this talk, but it's a very large team. And I'll show you some of the pictures of the team members. And everyone is a contributor to this project. There are people in San Diego, in Colorado, in Oregon, all over. And so I'll be showing some of their work and try to highlight some of the things that the entire project team is doing. So as you know, we're in a very disruptive time in technology with AI, just sort of broken onto the scene several years ago, ChatGPT, and this realization that really generative AI and new techniques are going to transform science. And so there are now large projects all over the world, in Europe, in the US, in Asia, in Japan, and other places, exploring how science can be impacted and take advantage of AI, and yet do it safely and in a way that gives us reproducibility and understanding of the data. So I'm going to talk about a particular project that explores this new space and is homed in the Office of Cyber Infrastructure, Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure at the NSF. So the concept, you saw Chris's intro with that neon tower in the background, it's very good timing, is that the concept is pretty straightforward, which is currently in most of these instrument networks, the data is collated and a small bit of that data is then shipped home, shipped to a cloud service provider somewhere. And when I say small bit of that data is that no site can support streaming all the data all the time at full resolution. It's just too much data. We have a test site that we did with a LiDAR on Nantucket. And, LiDARs can generate massive amounts of data. A radar can generate massive amounts of data. So we need techniques that address and reduce and observe that data in situ, right there at the point of generation. So the SAGE project is to explore that. So that means the idea is we could run your AI code right there in the neon hut, right in the building, right there next to the tower. And so what SAGE does is it's putting GPUs and this programmable environment that we'll talk about at the point where all of these sensors are living. This one is in Hawaii at Lahaina, looking down at the city that had previously suffered through the disaster of the fire. These two sites are in Chicago, and of course, this is a neon site. So by putting that GPU out at the site of the instrument, We can get a real-time AI analysis. We can explore adaptive sampling, like, oh, there's an interesting event happen. Let's change the sampling structure. We can explore large language models and using natural language to modify the instrument, to talk to the instrument in real, human text, and also to build AI agents that will do tasks for us at the edge. So this is a simple overview picture of that concept of moving the computation out to the edge. The SAGE project itself is a test bed. And that's important because it's providing a path to explore the future. It's not a production facility in the sense of NEON is a production decadal facility, and it has to produce reproducible, perfect, as perfect as possible results that come from instruments that are going to have a long year, multi-year lifespan. But a test bed is a place to try new ideas. And so we're part of the NAIR community. We're a pilot project where you could try new algorithms running at the edge. And so we already have in previous work, part of SAGE, deployed nodes into NEON. We have GPUs situated at some of the NEON sites. We're deploying a new generation of those nodes over the coming years. And those nodes let us process data right there at the edge, embed AI. And this is not a brand new idea because we actually started working on this in 2016 with Charlie Catlett on this project that Chris mentioned, the Array of Things, which was putting nodes in the city of Chicago. So we've been doing this for 10 years now, processing data at the edge. But now with the explosion of AI capability and hardware, we really can do some powerful things. We'll show a demo here in a moment. So this lets you explore the next generation, whether it's wildfire identification or flooding or new kinds of instruments all the way across the country. I mentioned that it's a very large distributed team. Nicola Ferrier is the deputy director. We have folks who are in Hawaii, Jason Lee, Dan Reed, who leads the advisory committee, Mike Papka at University of Illinois, Chicago, and Rajesh, who leads the architecture for the nodes, Manish Parashar at Utah, Gene Kelly, who this community might know quite well at Colorado State, Ilkai at San Diego. So there's a very large community of people who are all part of the SAGE project and are working to make SAGE available to NEON and to other instrument networks. So I mentioned running AI at the edge, at the instrument. What can you do with that? What are some ideas? Now, this is a small set. There are actually many things that people are doing, but I thought I'd point out some variety of these topics. So one already mentioned is wildfire detection, looking at images and automatically detecting things like that. Another is understanding audio and biodiversity. We'll have an example of that in a moment. Or looking in cities at urban safety, cars, pedestrians, their interaction, or understanding water and flooding. And now we're beginning to work with a new project that NSF has sponsored called CLASH, which is for terrestrial hazards. And they are interested in land shifts, especially after scarring from a wildfire or flood. It could be landslides, mud. And so I mentioned the Nantucket LiDAR, that steerable LiDAR, volcanic activity, which we'll talk about. All of these are examples of running an AI algorithm out at the edge to process the data and give us new insights. So what does this look like in a practical sense, in an architectural sense? Well, if you grabbed a piece of chalk and an old-fashioned blackboard, you might draw a picture very similar to this. It's a pretty straightforward design. The concept is that out at the edge, there are possibilities to add GPUs. And so for the NEON example, what it means is in that instrument hut, there's a rack-mounted server. And we ask NEON and they have a special program that supports this in a tremendous way. It's fantastic to support these kind of new research explorations. And so the NEON staff then install this server into their instrument hut and give us access to it so that we could process data in real time. So that's running, let's say, at the edge. In the cloud are the actual codes so that they can be shipped and run. If you're familiar with Kubernetes and these other packaging and orchestration tools, that's how we run things out at the edge, is standard cloud software. And of course, getting models from all the scientists who are sharing models on Hugging Face and others is a great way to explore and not just to have to develop your own model, but to borrow models that others have developed. But then the interesting thing now with AI large language models is, could I use text in order to interact with the entire instrument? In other words, could I interact with Neon and Sage by just typing and writing text? And that's the architecture for Sage Grande. So I mentioned I'd show one example here of, for example, monitoring biodiversity in real time. This is a Sage node that's on a tower that's called a ballasted tower. So these things can be temporarily moved into place. And this one has a little solar panel hut that manages giving it power. And here we're running not our model, but the Cornell bird model. So there are many institutions around the country who are developing great AI models. The Imagenomics group at Ohio State with Tanya Wolf-Berger has a BioClip 2 model that is amazing and is able to use images to understand what it's seeing, what kind of animals, what species they are. This one is from Cornell. It's an audio model. And so you can imagine here what's happening. It's pretty straightforward. We're running that model in real time. We're detecting things, whether they're, owls or blue jays, and we're also identifying things that we don't understand. This is something the model is not yet trained on. So here, rain or this insect, which looks probably like a cricket or something, are things that maybe a future model might identify. So this is an example of running on that full resolution data at the edge, and something that we want to do for Neon nodes as well. So quick summary, and then we'll move to some more deeper dive on some of the examples. So first thing to note is that Sage Grande is a test bed, and we're wiring it into Neon so that Neon can get extended test capabilities for AI. That means Neon will keep operating as this rock solid, decadal reference data set, but that scientists will be able to explore new ideas that are AI related and that connect to use that data or add new instruments. So here's an example of an infrared camera that is in Oregon. We have some infrared cameras that we've deployed into the Neon network that are available for people to use. The LiDAR on Nantucket was another example. And these really fall into two categories. The first is our computer science questions. How do I do self-supervised learning or cybersecurity or privacy enhancing technologies? So these are things that if you have computer science friends, they might be interested in. But in the Neon space, the kinds of questions might be, well, what kind of models are best? That BioClip model, could I fine tune that for my region? How would I get forecasts for what's happening in a ecological sense by linking to high performance computing? How might I identify new species or new behavior or new kinds of, or design new kinds of instruments? So this is the both user communities, this domain science, ecological science, environmental science, animal science, and computer science can use this test bed. So we have a web portal that is very straightforward and easy to use. If I have time today, hopefully I'll fire it up and show you. The nodes show, where they are. This particular node I'm showing is in Montana here, and you can see in this part of the screen here all the code that's running on that node. It's testing cloud cover, it's looking at the birds, the audio sampler, the avian diversity, cloud motion, the rain gauges, all that's being pulled in real time and analyzed. And each one of the codes that could be run at the edge is available in the cloud portal. Now, one note is that that this was all what I'm showing you here was built in the previous version of Sage, which was an MSRI, a mid-scale project. Now we're working on the new Sage Grande, and with the Sage Grande project, we're deploying very large GPUs out at the edge. So they're about 10x faster than what we deployed a few years ago. And these are the building blocks for the next generation Sage, and it's what people are using for robotics, for these humanoid robots. That's why NVIDIA has developed this platform. It's really for that next generation autonomous capability. And that's what we're going to deploy into Neon. So we have two kinds of nodes in Sage. We have the node that goes outside in the wild, cold weather, rain, and so forth. And we have nodes that go in an instrument enclosure, in a hut. So this is actually a Neon site, and there's a small hut, a small cabinet here, and there's a node that is a standard commodity server that goes in there. And we're going from these old Sage nodes, which were deployed here, to these new Sage, which are Blackwell nodes, which are a very, very powerful GPU from NVIDIA. So now let's talk about some examples. Now, these are examples not at Neon. I'm going to show some other examples because of the very unique area that they're in and some of the early results, but I thought I would share them here. So this is a outdoor Sage node that was deployed in Hawaii with the University of Hawaii. And it's at Volcano National Park. So now it's able to look at the volcano, Kilauea, there in Hawaii. And it's actually in the park. The university has a permit to allow the use of research instrumentation to be put on this tower. And we went out there in 2023 with 4 students here who helped us hoist this up and get it connected up along with the staff that are there in Hawaii that provided support for that. Now, what can you do with that? Well, this is where Sage, remember, Sage is a test bed. It allows exploration of ideas. And so the first thing that students did there is they said, hey, could we take, now this is an image from the top of the tower. Could we take an image from the top of the tower and use a standard AI model, of image model called Moondream? Could we use that model and just ask the model, is the volcano erupting? Yes or no? And, I mentioned that the nodes have a dashboard that shows all the code that's running here. And here we're running all these codes. But in this case, we're going to run a prompt. This is just saying where there is an AI code running at the edge. And now we're just going to ask, is there an image? And this worked. It's able to both find the eruption when it happens. Kilauea was erupting, has been erupting on and off the last few years, and even identify where that is. So this is an example of that. Now, this image is not ours. This is from the U.S. Geological Survey. They have a camera right there in the crater where we are not allowed to be. But this is our image from the tower, which is nearby. And we have both an infrared and a regular camera there. And you can see that even at night, we can see the heat build up left over from the most recent plume event of this, which is a fountain. And that plume event here then at night is just has warmed the rock, even though you can't see it with the naked eye. Now, what I find very fun about this as a test bed is, I don't know if some of you recognize this icon up here. That's Discord, which is sort of a, kind of used by gamer platform to do chat, kind of like Slack. And the students at Hawaii linked in that AI model running at the edge. They linked that into their Discord channel so that they could simply ask different AI models, is there a fire? Is there a natural disaster? And here in this text is the response from that AI model. Yes, the image you provided shows a volcanic eruption, which is considered a natural disaster, right? So these are examples of using AI to process the data in real time and even hook it up to texting channels to provide warning or provide other fast response. I'll give one more example from a national park in this case, because these kind of partnerships are particularly interesting. And of course, as I said, we already have nodes deployed in Neon, and I can show some of those nodes in a moment. But this is at the University of Wyoming, there's a small research ranch in Tetons. It's called AMK, and it's this cooperative research station. And we installed a node here. This is in late October, and it was actually snowing as we were installing the node. And that node has a pan tilt zoom camera. Now, and there also is one of these now installed in Neon, and we plan to install, probably a couple dozen more in the coming year. And the interesting thing about that is that now opens the door for AI-driven, sort of agent-based inspection or looking or probing the environment. So we got that node up and running, and now that node can run an algorithm to say, I'm going to look around and see what's interesting, what's happening. So here, that node has looked around and it's identified itself. Okay, this is the pole that it sits on. And it says, oh, hey, there's something right here. Okay, that's itself. But hey, I identified an animal. So now it's a pan tilt zoom. It can move around and it can zoom in with 30x optical zoom. So now it zooms in and it looks and says, oh, here, what is this? And here are some images taken from that autonomous, automatically probing steering camera. It's constantly looking, finding things, inspecting them. Sometimes they're logs, sometimes they're flowers. We can adjust the prompts to say how to guide that automated agentic exploration. And it has a infrared capability, so it has a night version, which we get good results from. One interesting thing here is that this particular elk was actually tagged in the ear. So it might even be possible to identify by zooming in further what elk that is, what number that is, or by looking at the scars or other markings on the elk. So this is, again, it's just an example that shows when we bring AI into Neon and provide in cameras and looking at, you could look at flux data in real time, all sorts of ideas you could explore. When that happens, it gives you a new kind of instrument that's sort of steerable, that's explorable in real time. So I'm going to show just a couple more examples from the Hawaii team. So this is a PhD student named Chris Lee, and Christopher has been working under the supervision of Jason at University of Hawaii, and he's been using even things like YOLO, which you probably are familiar with. It's a simple vision model to look and determine what do they see at Kilauea, and can they start now to benchmark the quality of the result. So again, for ecological purposes, we really want to get at precision, accuracy, recall, getting a good result, and that scientists can rely on. So this is a really interesting initial study of building a data set that they can use to understand this at Kilauea, understanding the smoke. Using another model, they could use Moondream, which is a different AI model. This one was with YOLO, and you saw the accuracy was 72%. Here, using a different model and getting a different accuracy. Again, this is Chris and Jason's work. And this gives us a view of the future, which is that AI models continue to get better. They continue to be fine-tuned. I mentioned the model, the BioClip model that Tanya Wolfberger and others developed at Ohio State. As new models come out, these numbers will continue to increase and will continue to get better understanding of our environment. And we're already looking at, well, could we build insect cameras using the Mothbox and other techniques? Could we already have things that are looking at clouds and doing atmospheric measurements. What is possible using Neon's existing set of instruments and then adding and augmenting that? There's also interesting ideas and research that can be applied for just, I'll say, anomaly detection, like something different Maybe flowers blooming at a different time of year. Maybe there's a freak snowstorm. What is happening that is unusual and anomalous? And are there algorithms that we could use to do that? And then finally, if you do that, this is a work in progress from Chris. What, in what ways might you be able to use new models, Dino V3 and others, to do a processing, to make an entire processing pipeline from neon data or other data to your science? So that's the core features. We can run code at the edge. That code at the edge can be AI code that you've generated. Just one moment. So, and I'm going to explain now that in addition to running code at the edge, we can build tools that are using the data sets that are collected. And so one example of that is the idea that all of the data that's collected, we don't remember we process things at the edge, but there are data that are collected and saved in a object store. Now we could process that object store using AI once it's in the cloud as well. So what would that kind of user tool look like? So we've prototyped one of those, and this might be a prototype that would be great for Neon, which would be, could you peruse and explore Neon data using AI after it's been collected and pulled into the cloud, and use a natural language interface to do this? So this is how we're currently doing it. Cloud data, meaning data that's already left the edge. Again, we process most of the data at the edge, but some of the data, we collect sample data from the edge. That can go into a captioning model like Gemma 3 from Google or others. It can be processed into a vector database so that the concepts of what's that image represents are now represented in a way that can be queried like a search. And this takes a lot of compute resources. So this is a place where the NSF supercomputer centers, where San Diego has helped out. So to process each one of those images might take 5, 10, 20 seconds. And we have thousands and thousands of images. Now, Neon has both image data, but also has flux data. It has moisture data. All of that data could be pulled into a AI interface that allows querying and discussion with natural language. And so then eventually that gets you to a point where you can ask questions like, show me images that have condors or other things. So this is an example. This is available right now in Sage. If you want to try this out, you can go to the website and try it out. And so there's a Sage image search. And what that lets you do is type things. For example, here I just did an example. I said birds, and it's going to return images. Now, again, we don't save all the images because you can't, but we take samples from each of the sites and store samples once an hour, once every 30 minutes. And so this was an example that got a beautiful capture of a bird in flight. But I also want to point out that AI is not perfect yet in many places. And this is not a bird. That is a anemometer, it's detecting, measuring the wind speed. It's that little propeller on top of a tower. And we have a camera that's looking up at the sky. And that propeller looks an awful lot like a bird wing. And the front of that looks like the head. So yes, that looks like a bird, but the AI got it wrong in this case, right? So the same for wildfire here, searching for animals. There's a wide range of things you could do to get data sets from once they've been saved to the cloud. And AI tools could be used in Neon to do the same thing. I'm going to point out another area that is exploding very quickly, and that's the area you probably have heard of people using AI to write code, to actually write their algorithms, right? To say, I need an algorithm that does this and help me out. That has been made possible by a variety of new tools using natural language to interact. You could use natural language to interact with Neon and Sage. And Anthropic had, led part of this work. This new kind of capability was something called the Model Context Protocol, which is really not very old. Again, the AI world is moving very quickly. But what it allowed people to do is to write capabilities and call tools and process things by having the AI be the agentic brain and then saying, do this for me, do that, reboot that node, check this code into GitHub, send this message to Slack. So the AI agent can do those things. So if we connect that to Sage, that lets us write code from the prompt. Like I can just open up a window and say, I need a piece of code that does this. Can you write this code and run it on that Sage node? So sometimes, because Andre Karpathy coined this term vibe coding, it's been called vibe coding, this idea that you're not coding by yourself by opening a text window, but you're interacting with an agent, a large language model, a coder module. So Sage provides that capability now. So if you wanted to try that out, again, Sage is a test bed. If you want to try that out, you can try that out. And here are just some examples of the kinds of questions that you could start with and prompt into Sage, right? Into Anthropic or ChatGPT, which is connected to one of these IDEs. So you could say, hey, I'm studying pollinator activity. What data might Sage have, right? Now, these are questions that we hope eventually we answer as well in Neon. So imagine going to the Neon interface for this and saying, I'm interested in this kind of question. What Neon nodes have this data? Where is that data? Could you make a file with that data? Can you process it in this way? All using natural language. So everything from, check my job, find a plugin for monitoring bird sounds. How do I create a custom plugin to detect flowers, right? These are all questions that these new coding agents, when they are connected to Sage, can get started on. Now, is all the AI code that they write ready and perfect? Not always, but it has been quite helpful, and students are using it all the time. I'll show some examples here in a minute. We also have partnerships, in addition to Neon, with American tribes. The Ojibwe is a partnership that we've been working with. It's part of this project that the NSF funded called the Manuman Collective from Lac du Flambeau and other places. Understanding Manuman is the Ojibwe word for wild rice, what we would call wild rice. And so we have partnerships to put nodes up and allow, again, ecosystem exploration, even in areas that are very, very remote. So I'll mention that we have this first of the new generation nodes. We already have a bunch of nodes in Neon right now, but we've started to install new next generation nodes in Neon, and that will occur over the next coming months. And the first one that we were looking at here was the Seeper site, which is very close to Boulder. And it got one of those large pan tilt zoom cameras. But also, one of the unique things we did at that site is we added an open LoRaWAN gateway to Sage. That lets people bury moisture sensors, battery powered, solar powered, even 3, 5, 6 miles from the tower and still be able to collect data at the tower. So this really broadens what Neon is capable of by saying wherever we put Sage nodes, the new Sage nodes, Sage Grande nodes into Neon, we're going to probably include these LoRaWAN gateways so that a broad field of new sensors students could be experimenting with, everything from moisture and solar irradiance to vibration and infrasound or other things. So it's a very exciting time inside Neon to explore AI. That University of Colorado State team is very interested in understanding drought, and they're planning on doing this for the entire state to wire in these kinds of resources, to wire in Neon as a drought network and use LoRaWAN and the image processing and other sensors inside Neon to build that network. Now, I mentioned that we have a lot of students working in this space, and I just wanted to highlight a couple of them because Remember, I've said several times that Sage Grande is a test bed. It's a Nair test bed as well, a Nair pilot as well, and it allows students to get on and try things out. So I mentioned that Chris Lee had done that work with Moondream in Hawaii. We have students who are working on understanding river flow and the speed. The Neon site, John Blackwell and Harik have been working on. Students at Northwestern, University of Illinois, Chicago, students at other sites and other universities as well. All of these are using the testbed to explore a new feature, to try to build a new kind of infrastructure. And we expect, coming soon in 2026 here, to see privacy, to see new workflows come out of, and air quality tests to come out of Utah. So I'll start to wrap up. I'm going to have plenty of time for discussion here. I wanted to point out that the website has a portal that allows you to drill down and look at individual nodes, at individual sensors, to look at the data, to then write queries and grab that data. We run virtual workshops. Occasionally, we had one in November. We'll have another one this spring, or probably before spring, maybe in March timeframe. We had about 40 people attend the last workshop, and it allows people to get a little jump start on how to get on Sage, how to write code or use natural language, how to run models, how to connect up their own instruments. So with that, this will be my final slide, but then I'll try and fire up the web browser just to show you some of the things that you might explore. So Sage Grande is a test bed that's linked into Neon and is expanding and is linking into Neon with new super cool GPU resources. It's to explore. Now I'll say that it's for exploring. What it's not going to do, you can't simply say, oh, I want a new data set. Can someone out in the world somewhere write code for me and write my AI code and then give me my ecological data? Not likely. No, you need to do that, right? Or your students. So it's a place to try those new ideas. It's not a replacement for a LICOR or another instrument where you're just getting the raw data that the instrument manufacturer produced. This is a place to grab new kinds of data, to take high resolution data out of the Neon data stream and process it, make new flux measurements. There are groups of people who are exploring, can we get a real-time flux approximation? What would that look like to get that at the edge? That's the kind of project that you can do. Run your own code, run the BioClip model, start building a way to look at to insects or other things. Explore running autonomous control like that pan tilt zoom camera I showed. Develop new algorithms. It's open for postdocs and students and educators. There's a professor at University of Illinois Chicago who's teaching a class right now. He has about 40 or 50 students. I think it's terrifying that many students are going to be using and writing code for the edge. And so you could use it to teach a class, to try new algorithms. So what's your neon science? Now, if you want to get involved, you just could schedule office hours. In other words, a Zoom call with us to ask questions. That's a great way to start. You could also send some email to the support channel and then we'll try and connect back, or you could join our Slack discussion. And I'm going to see now if I can do a quick share here. All right, so now I'm sharing the home page for Sage, which is sagecontinuum.org. And I just want to point out a couple things. One is if you wanted to get an account and try stuff out, you just click here, getting started. And that would tell you how to create an account, how to start exploring what you need to do, if you're an educator, what you might look for, so forth. We have lots of tutorials, how to submit a job, how to run your app, how to access data. So there's plenty of documentation here. If we go back here, another thing that you might be interested in is some of those new features that are being developed. So here under labs, we have that image search I mentioned. So you could, try an image search right here to ask for, we'll say elk. Of course, I don't know if this is going to work. We're going to do this in real time. So now it's querying that database of data that has been collected. Remember that not all data is saved. That's the point of having edge computing, but it is doing processing and occasionally sending the data to the cloud. This looks like it's processing right now. We'll let that process in the background. I'll open up another tab here and go to here. Another thing you could look at is doing that AI agent coding that I mentioned. So if you wanted to try that now, you could go in and install into your AI coding assistant, whether that's Cursor or Warp or Klein, or there's a bunch of these tools now that people are building, and you could wire that into Sage, and this would explain how to do that, right? And we also have that pan tilt zoom example that I gave where the camera autonomously moves around. If you wanted to understand that, then this is a web page that shows how that's working, but then you could use that to start exploring your own version of that, right? For your code. Now, that is all, I'll say, sort of static. Then if you want to come over here and click the portal button, that then shows all the nodes that are up, what they're doing. I showed that one node that was in Montana. I can click that node here and show, okay, here's that node in Montana. Here are all the code that it's running right now, the cloud cover code, the avian diversity monitor, temperature, pressure, humidity, all those things. We could look at the Hawaii node, if we can find Hawaii. Well, it looks like Hawaii is offline right now. I wonder what's happening with that. So let's see here. Go back to this node here, or we can go to the AMK Ranch. That's the one in the Tetons. And I can log in, and here are live images now because I have an account. Live images from the Tetons. I don't see any elk right now, but you do see this very interesting infrared image, which shows the temperature of the trees here, which is pretty fascinating. And you can also listen to audio samples from there. So this is the portal. You can look at the jobs that are available, the apps that people have written. These are all the different apps that you could run out at the edge. You could look at the sensors that are available and look through the data itself and query the data based on location and other places. So these are some of the things that you might explore if you're interested in understanding, and we're trying to fold these capabilities in as part of a test bed into Neon so that scientists can use Neon both as this, decadal reference instrument measuring the United States, and also as a place to explore and do new science, new techniques, and provide new AI capabilities. So with that, I'll wrap up and say, are there questions?
Thanks, Pete. That was a very interesting talk. Let's see. I do see one question here from Shalane, and the question is, if we had no data transmission constraints, so we could stream complete unprocessed data from the field in real time, would there still be a need to deploy processing hardware to the field? Assuming this is the main barrier, are there already sensors with low collection frequencies on high-speed networks that could be processed or controlled remotely in the same way?
Yeah, no, it's a very, very good question. And so I will take a minute just to answer because it's very useful. It's a great insight. So generally, people move computation out to the edge for one of about 4 or 5 reasons. And I'll just list them because you've listed one of them, but I'll list all the reasons. So the first is, as you mentioned, bandwidth. If you're completely unconstrained by bandwidth, bring all the data home, right? Now, that is, I'll say it's never the case because we're constrained by bandwidth, but that's one reason people move computation to the edge. But the other ones that still matter, so the next is latency. So a good way to explain this is if you think about a self-driving car, you really don't want the car's camera to be sending images to California to ask, is that a stop sign or not? That latency has to happen right there and then in the car so that you stop on time. So for Neon or other AI at the edge, this means if I want to control the pan tilt zoom, if I want to control instruments, some of these instruments might have millisecond or second latency constraints for getting active control. I need to put that right at the edge. Another reason that people put stuff at the edge is privacy. So we'd like, and we Neon has a unique form of privacy. It's not necessarily about humans. It could also be about what species you see. There may be images that are represent animals that we don't want to show the location of in real time, that we want to count, but we don't want to share further. There may be other things that need to be protected. And so we never want that, or of course, human faces and privacy in that way, but we don't want that data to ever leave the node even and go to the cloud. So that's another, we'll call it privacy preserving, but it could be humans or it could be other data that you want to keep local. Another I'll mention is power savings. Bandwidth is also power hungry. So it's often the case that sensing and looking at data locally will save power as opposed to streaming all the time. You recognize that with your cell phone, right? If you were streaming all the images, every time you try and take a picture and it's streaming up to the cloud, that uses your battery is gone in no time, right? The last one I'll point out is that it's reliability. So you would like your sensor network to continue operating even if the network goes down. So we have some nodes that are Starlink connected. And if something goes wrong, even if we had infinite Starlink bandwidth, we don't, but if we did, if something goes wrong in the network, there's a storm, something else, we want that node to continue its autonomous operation, moving cameras, collecting data, and then when network is restored, shipping off the appropriate data. So very, very good question, nuanced in many ways. We do want processing in the cloud like we have, but we also want processing at the edge. This is a both and as opposed to a replacement of one for the other.
All right. Thanks, Pete. That was a great discussion. Thanks, Shalane, for the question. The next question is, what are the most surprising outcomes you've been seeing as Sage Grande develops?
Yeah, very interesting question. So I would say a couple things. One is that natural language and AI large language models have opened the aperture of what people can do or explore by 100-fold, right? When we first started the Array of Things project that Chris had mentioned, the only way to run was to be a nerd, a computer science nerd. I mean, you had to know so much about what's happening at the edge, and it was a huge impediment. We just had just a handful of developers because it was just so hard. Now, with the new tool sets available, I'd say my first biggest surprise is that there are so many things you can do that's just natural language based. That's sort of shocking and remarkable to me. The second is that these new models, like Samantha linked to Tanya's imagenomics talk, like the BioClip 2 model, they're amazing. We took one of those elk images and threw it into the BioClip, and it came back, here's 99% likelihood that it's this, And so the thing that's amazing to me about the project is that other people's progress is automatically being able to be harvested by Sage and Neon. In other words, I didn't do anything. Tanya did all the work. And then one day a model is made available and Sage can use it and we get a benefit from someone else doing that work. And so that exponential, building on other people's shoulders has been startling as well. That can work so quickly because of the advancement of AI. It's really happening. In 6 months, there'll be a new model that is even more capable.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time with all these developments.
I could ask a question maybe while we're waiting to see if anyone else has one. So, Pete, It's so exciting that neon is part of this. I am curious, neon has our baseline instrumentation. So we're looking at the image of the flux tower where it's soil moisture and air temperature. The nodes that are at neon sites, is it more so that we can take the neon sensor data and process it and do derived things and analyses in real time, like you're saying? Or are new sensors being added? Like we don't have any audio, and now is there audio at every neon
Right.
tower when there wasn't? Or is it a combination? Kind of how does neon fit in the offerings of Sage?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. It is a combination. So when I talked to Paula about the original neon design, it was, of course, because of cost and other reasons, very tightly controlled. Like what is possible? What can we do for 20 years, 30 years? What does that look like? And that creates a set of sensors that are very tight. I mean, it's clear what those are for 30 years. What Sage, because it's a programmable infrastructure, is like, hey, there's a cool pan tilt zoom camera, there's a cool LoRaWAN, there's a new microphone. Hey, we want to study bats. We never studied bats before. We need ultrasonic microphones. It allows plugging those things in very quickly. And so the Sage node is a Linux node. It sucks up data from anything. So it allows new sensors to be thrown in as part of the exploration. And so but it also can pull data from the Kafka data streams directly in the Neon Tower. And we've done that in the past, and we hope that there's some, Sage exploration of that with fluxes being calculated in real time using new AI algorithms. We think that there's promise there, and also for extreme weather and other events to automatically in real time process that data.
Thank you. Fascinating. Well, okay, we are close to the top of the hour, so that does seem like maybe it's a good place to end it. What a fantastic and interesting project this is, Pete. We really appreciate you coming to speak with us about it. So much opportunity with integration with Neon and other things. We appreciate everyone for being here. Hope you got something out of this talk. This is the monthly seminar series, so we will have another one coming up in February. Let me just quickly throw the link to that one in the chat. It is kind of following on this theme of AI and environmental science and ecology. So if you enjoyed the talk today, we'd love to see you again next month. The recording should be posted on our Science Seminars webpage of this talk by the end of the week. So if you'd like to share that around with colleagues or go back and refer to it. Yeah, thanks again, Pete. This was wonderful, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And if you have places where you want Neon to have Sage nodes, talk to Chris and the team at Neon. They're prioritizing, where we will go next and what instruments could be added. So let's have that discussion.
Yeah, please reach out. Thank you, Pete.
Thanks.